Yeah, so apologies in advance of this one. This is the controversial Vauxhall Vectra. It was only ever called Vectra in the UK from when it first came out in 1996. Previous to that was in the UK, it's called Cavalier, but the Cavalier was called Vectra in Europe for many, many years before that. So basically this is GM, Vauxhall, Opel aligning the same name for this kind of car, a D-segment kind of rival to the Ford Mondeo, basically calling it the same thing from that point. This one's quite interesting because it's the Arctic Special Edition. They offered it in a few engines, but this one has the 2.5 litre V6. So it's around 170 horsepower. What that meant was with a manual gearbox, we do 0-60 in around the 7-second mark. So although it looked exactly like a basic Arctic, same wheels, same everything, there was no distinguishing features that actually, for the time, it was a very, very fast accelerative car. The police used them as undercover cars as well, and would do best part of 150 miles an hour, and was considered really understated. So the Vectra itself was never known for the best drivability. Ride was pretty poor, refinement pretty poor. It had interesting door mirrors, that's about it, as you probably would have heard that quote before. But yeah, the engine was quite interesting because it made it very, very fast. And there was a period from the early 90s to later in the 90s where manufacturers were putting as bigger engines as they could into quite basic cars and charging not a lot of money for them. That kind of thing still happens in the States, but it doesn't really happen in Europe anymore. So it was a kind of a golden era of putting great big V6s or high pressure turbo engines into relatively boring looking cars. And this Vectra is a great example of that. Chassis was far less uncouth than the previous Cavalier, which also was available V6 and was very, very quick. But yeah, this just looks really tame, but actually it's got a bit of a beast under the bonnet, so we quite like this. They later did GSI versions with the same basic engine but with more power, and super touring versions to link into the British Touring Car Championship successes as well. But they have more spoilers, more speedline wheels, those kind of things. This car looks completely standard. It was no different to the 1.8 petrol Arctic with you know, up to 50 horsepower less. So quite an unusual car. Vectra's never been very, very popular, but I wanted to point this one out because the engine is quite interesting. So this is something really quite special, but you wouldn't necessarily know by looking at it. So the Volvo 850 came out in 1992, 1993. At the point it had a facelift in 92, 93 actually, with the smaller light design. That's when they launched the all-important T5 model, and that's known for a number of different things. So the T5 was their performance model. Volvo had done turbo cars previously, but hadn't really emphasised the overall performance of it. This car really slayed it. It had 225 horsepower going through the front wheels. There was zero distinguishing features outside from the car. The wheels that you have on this T5, these ones here, these 5-spokes, are really, really pretty. You could get them as an option on the 2 litre or the 2.5, 10 and 20 valve models. So a real special car with a manual gearbox. It really, really flew. Not only mid-range acceleration, but also acceleration from standstill to get the traction. It would do 150 miles an hour, 0-60 in around 7 seconds. The saloons had often a rear ducktail spoiler. This one does, but other ones didn't. And this is in the communication colours of the car when it first came out. So this is a 1996 N reg car, but actually in 1993 the Volvo UK press car was a red estate in this same colour. And was also driven by Jeremy Clarkson. People talk about the later T5R and that when it came in yellow, and the later 850Rs being real performance models. They only had slightly more horsepower and no other mechanical changes compared to this, just some visual air dams and wheels and those kind of aspects. The T5 really was the genesis of Volvo's sporting prowess and performance. And no surprise to anyone, they went into the British Touring Car Championship as well in '93. So they originally used the estate car because they talked about it having better aerodynamics, but actually more of a marketing kind of gimmick, and Honda ended up doing that later on with the Honda Civic Tourer as well. But yeah, the aerodynamic property is still quite good on this car. Super comfortable, really nicely screwed together, ability to do hundreds of thousands of miles completely reliably, independently. I really want one of these. I want to find a nice one, and they do still exist out there. They're not rusting too badly. They're lasting pretty well. There's quite a few specialists, and part supply is pretty good. Fuel economy, it can be so-so, and also front tyre wear. All that power and torque going through the front tyres, they do chew their rubber. But yeah, the real iconic ones, the T5Rs in bright yellow and olive green, only came in 2 colours, and the 850R later, they've gone up in value massively. The T5 is starting to creep up, but they're not quite there yet. But bear in mind, these came first. These were the real defining Volvo performance models of their era. And I think they're fantastic. So yeah, keep an eye out for a good one of these. If you find a low mileage one, especially in manual, because the auto saps quite a lot of performance, then snap it up and enjoy it. A real powerful Q car. And again, none of the exterior trim or anything like that gave away any indication that it was a T5. I think it might have had a square exhaust pipe, and that's about it. So yeah, enjoy. They are fantastic cars. So for something a bit unusual, we now have an MPV. So it's unusual to have talking points on one of these things, but the Previa is quite an interesting car, hugely successful in the States. Actually, unusual for an MPV, it's actually mid-engine. The 2.4 litre engine sitting in the middle of the car, very good weight distribution, although ironically the car was never about drivability, it was about practicality. So being a Toyota, super tough, super durable, it's rear-wheel drive, so it could be fun to drive. It's been in quite a few American teen films as well, you might have seen it growing up. There's quite a few films where these feature in it as well, it's quite iconic. Known for being really, really durable, going on forever, basically, quite easy to service. Various number of seats, so captain's chairs as well. Also has a very famous owner, so the Right Honourable Boris Johnson bought one brand new and it lived in Islington from 1996 onwards. Actually exactly the same engine as this, it's a P-Reg one, although his was a sole special edition in purple, and I believe he owned it till very, very recently. He might still have it now, I don't really know. But he had a lot of children and he needed a lot of car, and this car did that job, and it went on and on and on, hence he kept it. So yeah, an interesting car, I think, ripe for tuning and ripe for doing something a bit different with it. So maybe turbo conversion, LSD maybe. You can still get these, find them relatively low mileage. It was sold as the Toyota Estima in Japan. A lot of them were imported as well at higher spec. But for me, I'd want an original UK model with the twin sunroofs and those tweed seats as well. So it's a really interesting MPV, probably the most interesting MPV I think they've ever made. So yeah, really good talk about this car, and again, super tough and durable. And yeah, if you are going to buy one used, just make sure you get it properly rust proofed. Other than that, it's going to go on and on and on. So this here is quite an important car for Volkswagen Group and the Skoda brand specifically. This is the first car that was designed under Volkswagen ownership of Skoda, who bought the company. The previous car, the Skoda Favorit that the Felicia here replaced, that had a certain level of work done by VW to fine tweak it, but this is the first kind of clean sheet design. I say it was clean sheet, so you built in the Czech Republic to a low price, so actually the engine was carried over from the Favorit, a really kind of ancient 1.3 single point injection unit with about 65 horsepower, so it wasn't the most refined of things. Volkswagen bought in their own 1.9 diesel naturally aspirated from the Polo, and then also a 1.6 bit later on. But again, it was a bargain basement, that was the idea with this car. The design was actually a lot fresher and slightly bigger than the Volkswagen Polo, so really good value for money. And the Felicia was quite successful, but the cars that came after, the later cars, the Fabia, those kind of things really did set Skoda off, and the Octavia especially, to be a kind of proper volume brand, which is now actually quite premium. And this car was a core part of that journey. They never made a sporty version, and this is a really basic one with steel wheels and everything like that, the LXI version. They didn't even have power steering as standard, that only came standard in the 1.6 models. But really tough and durable. You could service it with really rudimentary tools, 1.3 litre LXI engine. So yeah, fantastic little car. It did move Skoda forward massively.